So in this video, I want to go into a deep dive on how to get the new Meta Quest Passthrough Camera API working in Godot. There's a couple of stringent requirements for this at the moment, and it's a bit buggy. Things are changing. Meta's making updates. I would say that if it's further in the future and Godot 4.5 is out, you may not need to do a lot of the things in this video, but this video could still serve as a useful jumping off point or for debugging if someone's having trouble. So the first thing you're going to need is you will need Godot 4.5 Dev 4 or newer. That's because a bunch of new things got merged recently, so you'd want to upgrade your project, whatever project you have, to running on that. There is one thing that didn't get merged as part of that, which is this PR for Godot. And since that got merged after, the one thing you will have to do in addition to is to go grab the Android templates for exporting your project to Android, which is what the Quest is. I'll have links for all these things in the description, including a list of some of the settings I have, what versions of packages I have installed, so that way it's all clear from that perspective. Hopefully, again, with 4.5, you wouldn't have to do this or some of these other steps. And then the last thing you will need is this plugin installed for the latest release of that. I assume also that you have a full, Godot XR setup with an XR origin set with all those things configured, and that you've got godot-xr-tools, open XR vendors plugins, so that you have the Quest support, and that you have the ability to do remote deploy to the Quest headset. You'll also need a Quest 3 or 3S. This will not work on the Quest 2. And the HorizonOS needs to be version 74 or later, which at this point, most devices probably have that. So the next thing we're going to need to do, now that we dump into the meat of things, is we go to Export, Advanced Options. Most of this should be pretty vanilla for going to the Quest. The main thing that'll be different is adding a custom permission for the headset camera, this permission here. And then you'll also need just regular camera support. Now, the one little trick that's a little annoying for the moment, if you remember, I said that you'd have to go pull down from the GitHub action on GitHub for Godot the Android templates. So here's where this comes into play. So you can right click here and tell it to open in the file manager for your Android templates. You'll likely, since you're using a new version of Godot anyway, it'll probably give you a warning when you try to do remote deployment that the templates you have don't work because they're for the wrong version of Godot. So you'll delete this folder, the build folder. You can leave plugins and this other things here. So in your Android folder in your project, delete build. And then you can do install Android build templates. That'll add the build folder back. But then inside the build folder, what you'll need to do is go to wherever you've downloaded and extracted the folder for those new Android templates. Basically, copy all this, Control-C. Yeah, and when it asks you to, just say, replace the files in the destination. And so that'll get you the updates from that GitHub action for your build templates. Now, once we have that, and everything's ready to go that way, the next thing is let's talk about some of the things in the scene here. So for the most part, depending on what you're doing in your project, you won't need to do this. But it is useful for debugging and confirming that everything's working properly. For my project, I'm not actually going to bring Passthrough into the experience itself, but I do want to make sure the feed's working. You'll have your main root node, which is going to be a node 3D. In that, I have a table here that's not really relevant to what we're doing. Just for my project that I'm using for testing some things out. Underneath that, I have a couple of things, but really it's this mesh instance 3D camera display. And that is a simple plane mesh. We've overridden the surface material with a standard material 3D. And then some transform settings to rotate it, move it, scale it. That should all be all that's needed for that one. Underneath that, you want a camera viewport, which is going to be a sub viewport. The size, you want it to be set to the video feed, ideally, that you're bringing in. Again, it depends on if you want this to be permanent or you're just debugging. Update mode should be set to always. And then transparent background turned on. These are at least the settings I have. It's possible some of these aren't needed, but this is what ended up working for me. And then underneath that, you want to text direct. I've got a default texture, image texture set to it right now. The expand mode I have to fit width, and then keep aspect covered for the stretch mode. Okay, now we can go look in the code. So at the root node here, I have a main.gd script that I've attached to this node. So we go look in this file. We've got some of the basics set up for XR. And I'll just show that briefly. Here's all like the vanilla XR setup stuff for getting VR working. And then I'm initializing already the CameraServerExtension. So I did mention installing that camera server. I'll show this real quick, the project settings. So these are the plugins I've installed. Obviously you don't need Sky 3D or Terrain 3D, that's what I'm doing. But I do have godot-xr-tools here, the CameraServerExtension, and then also I believe the OpenXR vendors, I think you just have to bring them in manually. They don't show up in project settings. So that CameraServerExtension on ready, initializing it to a new instance of itself. And then I do have a feed up here, the camera feed, which is also the camera feed extension. So these both extend off of the built-in Godot features. On ready, I do have a check for permissions. So let's see if we have permissions yet. And here I've got an array of required permissions. Again, it's that Android camera and the HorizonOS headset camera permissions. And then I'm just checking from the grant to permissions, do we have that permission in there? If we're missing one of them, return false, which means we don't have permissions. When you first launch this for the first time, obviously we're not going to have permissions set. We're going to connect a permission result signal so that when this is done, we'll call this method, and then we'll request permissions. Otherwise, if it's the second time you've launched the app and permissions have already been granted, well, then we can just call the method directly. So inside this method, we are going to tell the camera server, now this is the Godot's built-in camera server, not CameraServerExtension. We're going to tell it to monitor feeds, and we're going to go get an array of feeds. Now, if the feed list only has, let's say, one camera in it, that means that something didn't go right, and we're just going to return. You should have three. The first camera would be the user's avatar, which you could display that inside the experience if you want. And then camera 2 is going to be the left camera, I think, and camera 3 is the right camera, something like that. But assuming we've passed that, I'm initializing a couple of elements here. Again, just fetching the things that I want to display on. I did create for myself an array dictionary here. These are all the resolutions that Meta currently supports for the camera. So the highest you can go is 1280 by 960. And then for the camera that I'm choosing, yeah, I'm going to camera 3, the third index, which is going to be the last one here, the biggest, just for the heck of it. And then for feeds, again, feed 0 is going to be the avatar. I'm just going to go for camera feed 1. Tell camera feed, which we've initialized up here, camera feed extension, that's important, to be feed 1. We then set the format. This is something you have to do for Android, which again, the Quest is an Android device. If you don't do this, things won't work correctly. And this is, again, just setting that ID and then setting the width and height that we want to get for it. I don't think technically this is needed, but I do have it here. There are a couple of things here that are behaving oddly. I don't know if it's just because Godot is new to adding this feature and it's experimental. I don't know if it's the fact that Meta's stuff still has a bunch of bugs with it that they're ironing out. So again, some of the things I'm doing here either might not be needed now or might not be needed soon in the future. Then we tell the feed to turn on, activate it. And then I've got a couple of things here which are really just to set the viewport size, the texture size, get those set up, assign the texture texture, which is going to be our camera texture. And that camera texture, we've kind of initialized to nothing. It's a new camera texture. But then we can say for the camera texture, set its feed ID to go grab that camera feed. And then, changing some things about the material and setting our material override to this new material that we're initializing. So if all of that's working and all that's configured properly, now what we should see, if we run this. Okay, so with that launched, I'll bring the headset to my face, grab my controller, say continue. Now the first thing I'm going to be presented with is the permission request, which I don't think you will see since the screen sharing here won't show that. But I'm going to accept the first permission and accept the second permission. And now we have nothing. It's white. And I believe this is a bug on Meta's side and something they'll probably resolve soon. But if I quit and then relaunch it again, now all of a sudden the feed will work. So it's one of those things you have to kind of kill it first and then it'll work. For rapid debugging, one thing you can do to alleviate that, I've found, is when we go to do the build. So we'll kick off another build right now. And so that's finishing up. It's about to be installed on the device. It's currently deleting, installing new files. And the second that finishes, I can run a new command here. So I can run an ADB command to grant permissions for both the Android camera permission and the headset permission with an and in between them. And this saves me a step as developer. I don't have to sit there with the controller and click them. So I'll send that. And then now I'll pick up the headset off of my desk and it'll launch me into the experience. Here, let me share my screen. So again, I'm getting this message because I'm not in the right place. But if I launch the app now, it'll skip the permission request. And in fact, it'll skip that error that we were seeing as well, where for whatever reason it can't get a camera. And now it actually just works. So, yeah, the one thing I'll tell you is what's happening is that first time it runs through, for whatever reason, it only finds one camera and only ever one camera. And it's obviously not a camera you want. But then when you kill the experience and relaunch it, then you get all three cameras available. I'm not really sure what's going on there. It must be something with the permissions. I did check to see, hey, if we request permissions, but then we do some sort of waiting, wait some amount of time and then try to initialize, will it work? And it just doesn't seem like it would. So I'm guessing there's some sort of thing where maybe like the camera things kick off before permissions are requested, and since they fail to initialize all three cameras, it just can't. So I think this is something Meta will fix in the future. So that should be everything you need to get going and get started with Passthrough Camera in Godot. Again, in the description I'll have some notes as well as some links off to some things. And then for my project, if you're curious what I'm going to do with this access and this new power, you can check out my reading room devlogs that I've been posting on this channel, where I'm working on letting you take a physical book in the real world off the shelf, open that book in front of you with the VR headset on, and not just like read that book in VR by doing OCR and pulling that text into the environment, but also matching the ambiance around you to the context of what you're reading. So if that's something you're interested in, you can hang out with me here on this channel. I also do live streaming to Twitch and YouTube, usually on Monday and Wednesday mornings, East Coast time. But that's it for now.